customer to understand that and getting the supplier to actually agree as to exactly what's going to be complied with is quite a lengthy debate at the contract stage. And then of course you still need the customer to say, you know, we told you to comply with the Data Protection Act. We just realised we don't know what the Data Protection Act, you know, parts 7 and 8 actually means. So can you do some consulting work with us for our pharmaceutical company, for our energy company? Data Protection Act will mean the following bits of data in the following locations will be available under the following conditions. You know, the kind of if-then-else statement which you're really used to. Of course, we want reports and alerts. How many alerts do you want? Well, IBM produces around about 1.5 billion events per day. You didn't want that many alerts. You wanted alerts which were above some threshold. And that's where we really get into the risk business rather than the compliance business. And so the difficult part of the whole of this, really, is the risk assessment and management part, where the customer actually says what their assets are and how much they're worth. Even that's quite difficult. It's difficult finding in most organisations some named person who actually says, yes, that database containing those names and addresses is in my business unit and I'm the person responsible for it. And if anybody else wants to look at it, then they have to come to me and there'll be a process, a governance process. And I'm the person who's going to tell you how much it's worth. And that's the sort of beginning of the risk assessment. Obviously you need some kind of algorithms you have for doing the risk assessment. We might come on to those a bit later. But we've now got some kind of partnership between what the customer wanted and what the supplier was able to produce in the way of a working relationship. And this defuses, to a large extent, the problem of, you know, we never told you what to do, and the supplier says, and so we didn't do it either. So at least if it goes wrong, they are jointly in this game, and they know exactly how fast to react, and how much more money they might be prepared to invest to decrease the size of the threats. Now this is where, in some sense, I really have to hand over to you and say, we want some management science behind this. Fortunately, we have an organisation called COBIT, Control Objectives for IT, which is set out in a sort of framework, which is exactly the kind of consulting framework which you'd expect. You wanted governance, assurance and control of security. Up here, how's it going to work? How's it going to be implemented? How do we measure that performance? And how does it reflect in terms of board responsibilities? So the board says, outsource security. And then people layer down and say, we've got this group of companies who we can outsource security to. How are we going to measure the criteria for outsourcing successfully? And then, when you've gone through the RFP process and you've actually kind of outsourced it, what kind of frameworks you're going to put in place to actually deliver the governance, risk and compliance. I mean, it looks kind of noddy stuff. I mean, in some sense, it looks so easy as to why didn't you do it in the first place? But the number of companies who sort of are sleepwalking, the number of suppliers who don't mind them sleepwalking as long as they pay, is quite large. To some extent, it's a kind of a complicity. Everyone agrees that there are things wrong, but in fact, if you put them right, it will cost a lot of money, and it also means that you're admitting that there were things wrong in the first place. And so, as you know, IT systems are under-specified, and eventually the costs go up, or alternatively, they don't work successfully. And neither party wants this. The suppliers, particularly IBM, we really want the thing to work successfully, and we want the customer to actually specify what they want to a level where everyone's going to be happy with the price and the response. The only people who are going to be unhappy, of course, are the hackers in the background. But of course, they've got infinite resources. They can wait 10 years until it's outsourced to somebody else. So they're always there. But that's a framework for doing it. Put pictures around that framework. That's the governance part. We've got shareholders, stakeholders, integrated governance. We do risk analysis. in some sense that's just rearranging the pictures to make it look nice. But you've got to do this several times to get a kind of an agreement as to exactly how it will work. And eventually you get down to this level. Inside COVID, there are 4 major sections, and then there are about 150 subsections, and that's the section which deals with security. So for each of those, the supplier says, okay, so what did you actually want to do in terms of an instant definition? How many people, how much time, what kind of forensics do we need to do? And the customer says, well, what's best practice? And we say, there's a kind of a two-way kind of dialogue here. Exchange of sensitive data. So if we've got information about threats, how are we going to send it to the customer? And how's the customer going to send sensitive data back to us? Couriers, encrypted CDs, we can agree on a framework, but we have to actually agree on it up front. We can't wait until it's an instant and then say, oh, well, get a few people on a mobile phone, that's probably good enough. So all of this has to be not just written down what you're going to do, but you have to write down, have we rehearsed it? Who's the person responsible? And how are we going to know whether it actually works? So there have to be sort of criteria both ways around. A forwards direction, this is what you do, and a backwards direction, this is what we did, and so we actually have evidence of how it's working. I said I'd say a little more about risk assessment. But again, to some extent, this is a kind of pretty picture version of it, but there isn't much more to risk assessment. Disappointing, isn't it, in some sense? Yes. There are no statistics, there are no kind of fancy algorithms, there's nothing really in risk assessment that actually is a reliable piece of mathematics. So I can see somebody in the back row thinking, well, he is crazy, he doesn't know what he's talking about. The trouble with statistics on security, that's obviously where you would start. If you were doing risk assessment properly, you'd say, well, what's the probability of this going wrong? Either it's working perfectly and it's completely secure and no one can find any way of cracking it, or someone's downloaded the DoQ virus unknowingly and it's completely insecure. So it's gone from 0 probability of attack to 100% probability of attack within 5 minutes. And that's why I say that the statistics are not a good way of thinking about this. It's not like measuring the reliability of a pump inside some power station or something. It's not like the reliability of a business process where you have a nice graph of statistics saying, bell-shaped kind of curve, and mean time to failures, or the number of cases that exceed 99.5% or something. So computer security is either there or it isn't. You can't predict when the security is going to break. You can take ensembles of systems and say how many of those broke yesterday, but that's not a very good guide to how many of them will break tomorrow. That Java incident, that zero-day attack I had up there, was only worth 100,000 because in fact nobody else knew that in fact it worked. If everyone knew that there was going to be attacks of that kind, you'd patch your systems, close down the systems, stop using Java. There's lots of things you could do. But it's worth a lot of money because it flips the statistics from being completely safe to being completely unsafe. So that's why it's worth having. But clearly, you could go through a process. You could say, well, are your data centers secure? What's the physical security review? Have we got documents on all of the systems which we are meant to be looking at the assurance of? Is there an analysis process so we actually decide what kind of methodology we're going to use for assessing the security of the system? I'll go through a little methodology in a moment. One of the key things, in fact, is profiling the threats. So there's not a great deal of point in making the system more and more secure if there are no hackers, if there's no attackers out there. So you want to know whether the threat is directly from a source, a foreign government, for example, whether that source actually has to break in directly, or whether in fact you can bribe somebody to do the work inside. The actor, in the case we had, was a kind of naive employee who downloaded something. He was bribed into going to a site which in fact was enticing and gave him innocent enjoyment and loads of free music or something. But the threat source was acting on the threat actor using a particular attack vector. In other words, we want to do this for lots of different scenarios to actually see whether we can find a good way of attacking your particular system. The other area which is crucial for this debate, very few organisations we come across have a risk appetite, a risk tolerance, a risk level they say they are happy to accept. How much risk will you accept? I mean, you'll quite happily cross the roads around the campus here. You probably wouldn't cross the M40. There's a kind of level of risk appetite which you feel you can make some kind of judgment about. How much data will the organisation lose without feeling it's a kind of a serious threat? And the answer is, well, we'll lose loads of data as long as it's not actually something which is going to undermine the status of the company and doesn't affect the share price. In other words, we'll lose quite a lot of data as long as it's just paying out more money as a result. But as soon as it actually closes down the company, there's a government investigation, and we start suing people, those are the critical bits of data we didn't want to lose. So we need information asset owners to actually value the asset